Let them go. Please, please. The words tore through the house just as Tristan Calderon pushed the door open. For 2 years, this mansion had been orderly, quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that wealth buys when no one asks questions. His twin daughters, Eliza and Noelle, lived inside schedules, nannies, and silence. Their laughter had vanished the same year their mother disappeared from their daily lives. The woman he trusted now, Meredith Hale, had stepped into that silence effortlessly. First as his staff, then as his comfort, then as his fiancée. She was polished, calm, good with the girls, or so he believed. The only one who ever seemed troubled was the new maid, Kayla Fields. Young, soft-spoken, always hovering near the twins as if she expected something terrible to happen. Tristan assumed it was nerves, or inexperience, or fear of losing her job. He never imagined she was afraid for his children. Because 2 years earlier, when Lydia Calderon confronted him about Meredith's behavior, about the way the twins reacted in her presence, he chose not to listen. He chose peace over truth, control over warning. And in the quiet storm that followed, Lydia lost her place in the house and in her daughters' daily lives. Now, standing in the doorway with that single desperate plea still echoing in the air, Tristan felt something he hadn't felt since the day Lydia walked out in tears. Fear, and somewhere deep beneath it, the first whisper of regret. Sometimes the warning comes back to us, only when it's too late to ignore. What had Kayla just witnessed that made her beg like that? Before we continue, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's dive back into the story. The mansion was a monument of silence, echoing with everything left unsaid. Every morning started with precision breakfast at 7:15, learning blocks at 8, supervised play at 10. Eliza and Noelle, barely able to string full sentences together, already lived by the clock. Kayla found it unsettling. There was no chaos, no laughter, just compliance. 2 small souls trained to survive order. Meredith, the fiancée, ran the home with a clipped tone and sharper eyes. She was always immaculately dressed, lips pursed like she was swallowing judgment. Her rules were carved into the air like scripture. No loud voices, no clutter, discipline before delight. Even the toys had a schedule. It wasn't that she was outwardly cruel, but Kayla noticed things. Eliza flinched when Meredith reached to adjust her collar. Noelle stiffened under a gentle pat. Their tiny shoulders would draw in, eyes darting like they were preparing for impact. The kind of reactions that weren't taught, they were learned. Kayla's heart ached, but she said nothing. Not yet. She only ever saw their father, Tristan, in glimpses, a ghost in his own home. When he did appear, it was with brief nods and distracted words. And always, he deferred to Meredith. Ask her. If Meredith's okay with it. She handles the house now. He seemed like a man who had handed off the steering wheel and closed his eyes. One afternoon, while cleaning the hallway outside the study, Kayla noticed something odd. A large, frame-shaped square on the wall. The wallpaper just a shade brighter where sunlight hadn't reached. Something had hung there for a long time. It was gone now. Later, in hushed tones over folded laundry, 2 maids whispered what she suspected. That was Lydia's photo, big one, holding the twins in the garden. Taken down the week, Meredith moved in. She lost everything at once. Kayla paused mid-fold. What do you mean? Lost everything? A shrug. A sigh. Everything. The husband. Her place. The kids. Kayla swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the staircase where tiny footsteps had once probably echoed in joy. It was like Lydia had been erased, not just from the house, but from the memory of those within it. She found herself walking through the halls with more reverence, like she was walking through the remnants of a woman who had once breathed life here. Now, it felt sterile, unclaimed, haunted not by ghosts, but by absence. At night, Eliza murmured in her sleep, "Mama," just once. Then silence. Kayla knelt by the bed, brushing a hand over the child's brow. "She hears you," she whispered. even if they pretend she was never here. Some mothers watching this know how quickly a woman can be erased from her own home. Staying with this story feels personal because it is. If you've ever felt replaced, or watched another woman try to survive where she once bloomed, you know why this matters. In the corner of the room, beneath the dim lamp, Kayla noticed a scrap of paper tucked behind a dresser leg. A torn edge of something floral. Faded. Familiar. She reached down, heart suddenly pounding. What had this house buried? Why was Lydia erased so completely? And what truth is hidden behind the walls of this perfect home? Don't look away now. Some truths only come out when someone's finally willing to ask the wrong questions. Before the silence settled like dust, there was fire. It was a Thursday. Lydia had brought the twins to Tristan's office for a surprise lunch. The girls, barely walking, toddled behind her with peanut butter on their chins and ribbons in their curls. The receptionist had hesitated but smiled. "She's inside," the woman had said, before realizing who she was speaking to. Lydia didn't knock. She didn't need to. The door opened to low laughter and a scene that should have shattered the laws of reality. Tristan leaned against his desk, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Meredith, perched on the edge, tie in hand, lips dangerously close to his ear. They hadn't kissed. Not yet. But the space between them pulsed with betrayal. Lydia stood there, her daughters now clinging to her legs, innocent. Watching, the room fell into silence. Meredith straightened. Tristan cleared his throat, stepping back. "Lydia, this isn't what—" "Don't." Lydia cut him off, voice too calm to be safe. "Don't insult me with lies that don't even try to live." Later that night, the storm truly hit. Back at the mansion, Lydia confronted him. No staff, no children, just the truth. She cried not for herself, but for the collapse of what she thought was sacred. "You let her into your world, Tristan. You let her into ours. While I was raising your children, you were raising something else behind my back." He didn't deny it. He didn't fight for her. Instead, he said nothing. Silence. His chosen shield. Image. His idol. He poured himself a drink, looked away, and said the words she would never forget. "This doesn't have to get messy," but it already had. Lydia's voice rose. Her hands trembled. Not with weakness, but with the rage of a woman betrayed. The kind of rage that isn't irrational, it's earned. But by the next morning, the whispers began. She's unwell. She's becoming unstable. She's not thinking clearly. Her grief was rebranded as hysteria. And slowly, without any one moment to mark it, access to her daughters was narrowed. Supervised visits, excuses, schedules she hadn't approved. Meredith was helping, of course. Meredith was stabilizing the home. Lydia wasn't asked to leave. That would have been too obvious. She was edged out, one decision at a time. A favorite stuffed toy disappeared. A photo frame quietly replaced. Her closet emptied while she was away, resting. The home she had built around her children became foreign, sanitized, like she was a guest in her own story. But just before the final door closed, Lydia tried to warn him. She stood in the doorway of his study, heart splintered, but voice clear. "You think she only wanted you?" Lydia asked. "You think this is about love?" He looked up, guarded. "What are you talking about?" But Lydia only shook her head. "When you finally see it, I pray it's not too late." And then, like a prophecy falling flat in a room of deaf ears, she walked away. Some of you have walked in Lydia's shoes, shamed not for doing wrong, but for feeling too much. If you've ever been labeled unstable for refusing to accept betrayal, you know how it feels to scream truth into silence. Don't look away from this, because sometimes the only way a woman disappears is when everyone else pretends not to see her fade. What did Lydia try to warn Tristan about? What did she see in Meredith that no one else did? Stay with this. Because one day, someone you love might need you to believe their story before it's too late. Some wounds don't bleed. They shrink a child's world, inch by inch, until all that's left is silence. It began with Eliza at breakfast. She used to giggle when the orange juice made her tongue tingle, or ask Kayla why toast gets darker in the toaster. But now, she sat still, quiet, eyes trained on her plate, lips pressed together like the words might betray her. Even when spoken to, she would only nod or shake her head. Noelle, once the bold twin, had started wetting the bed. At first, Kayla thought it was just a bad dream, but it became frequent. Noelle would wake up with damp pajamas and shame etched into her face, bottom lip trembling as she struggled not to cry. Meredith's response was clinical. "She's doing it on purpose," she said over dinner one night, sipping from a crystal glass. "They're manipulating. Children are smarter than people think. This is a game." But Kayla didn't see games. She saw grief with no language. She began to comfort the girls in the quiet spaces between the rules. A whispered song while brushing their hair. A warm towel and extra cuddle after a night accident. She learned to memorize the sound of their silence, to listen for what they weren't saying. The girls clung to her now, not loudly, not with tantrums or tears, but in the quiet ways that matter more. Eliza would reach for her apron when no one was watching. Noelle would crawl into her lap during story time, eyes flicking to the door like she was afraid someone would take her away. One afternoon, as Kayla folded laundry in the twins' room, she noticed faint red marks on Noelle's upper arm. Small, like fingerprints pressed too hard during a game that wasn't fun. "Eliza," Kayla whispered gently. "Did Noelle fall?" Eliza looked up, then looked away. Her tiny shoulders lifted in a shrug, her mouth sealed tight. Later that same day, it happened. Kayla was in the hallway, gathering toys, when she heard a stiff laugh from the playroom. Peeking inside, she froze. Meredith had Noelle by the wrist, not yanking, but gripping, too tight, too long. Her manicured fingers wrapped around the tiny arm with a smile stretched too wide to be kind. "We don't throw toys," she said sweetly. Noelle wasn't crying, but her eyes were begging. Kayla stepped in without thinking. "Is everything all right in here?" Meredith turned, still smiling. "Of course," she said, releasing Noelle's wrist like it had never happened. "We were just having a little discipline moment." Noelle scurried to Kayla's side, clutched her apron. Eliza stayed in the corner, watching, silent, like a witness who had learned that truth had consequences. If you've ever been a child who stopped reaching, or a mother who sensed something was wrong, you know that children don't shut down without reason. And when adults call it manipulation, they turn pain into punishment. Some of you watching this feel that in your chest because it was your story too. Meredith swept past Kayla, humming. The room felt colder after she left. Kayla bent down, hugged Noelle close, and whispered, "You're safe with me." But in the pit of her stomach, something twisted. Because what if they weren't? Is this just discipline? Or is Meredith hiding something much darker behind her smile? Stay with this. Someone has to keep watching, especially when no one else will. The longer Kayla stayed in the house, the more she realized it wasn't walls that made a home unsafe. It was the people allowed to hide behind them. She hadn't meant to overstep. The words had been gentle, barely above a whisper, carried on the breath of a housekeeper who knew her place. "I just think maybe the girls need a softer touch sometimes," Kayla said, folding linens beside Meredith in the laundry room. Meredith didn't even pause. She kept folding, sharp, crisp creases in the sheets. But her voice, low and clear, cut through the air like broken glass. "Do your job, Kayla. Nothing more. I care about them," Kayla said softly, holding her ground. Meredith turned then, slowly. Her eyes were calm, cold. "Care all you want," she said, stepping closer. "But overstep again, and you won't be in this house long enough to say goodbye to them." Kayla swallowed. "Is that a threat?" "It's a reminder," Meredith said, smiling. "You're paid to clean, not to parent." Kayla didn't respond. She didn't need to. The message had already been delivered. Later that evening, she considered going to Tristan. Surely if he knew. She found him in his home office, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up when she knocked. She stepped in, heart pounding. "I need to talk to you about the girls," she began. He didn't look up. "Meredith already told me." She said you've been interfering. No, sir, Kayla hesitated. I just think something's not right. I've seen things. Tristan finally looked up. She's raising them now. Not you. Not their mother. And not the help. The word landed like a slap. The help. Kayla nodded slowly, her voice tightening. Yes, sir. She turned and walked out before he could see the tears. Not for herself, but for the twins. For what silence was costing them. That night, the house phone rang. Once, Kayla was closest. She picked up out of instinct. Hello? A pause. Then a familiar voice, soft and desperate. Is this Kayla? She knew that voice. It was Lydia. But before Kayla could answer, the line clicked. Disconnected. She rushed to the call log. Nothing showed, as if it had never happened. The next morning, the twins were dressed in matching outfits. Smiling mechanically for a staged photo Meredith was posting online. Kayla watched as they held hands, Eliza squeezing Noelle's fingers just a little too tightly, like she needed something to anchor her. That's when it hit her. They were smiling for everyone, except themselves. Kayla later asked the head of staff, casually, if the girl's mother had any contact. The answer came without hesitation. No outside calls. Not even from her. Especially not from her. Especially. The word rang louder than the silence that followed. Sometimes the people with the least power are the only ones brave enough to speak. If this story feels heavy, it's because silence always costs someone. And when the wrong people are believed, the innocent pay the price. That night, as Kayla passed the nursery, she paused. The door was cracked open. Meredith was inside, brushing Eliza's hair. She was smiling, but the grip on the brush was tight. Too tight, and Eliza wasn't blinking, just staring. What is Meredith truly capable of when no one is watching, and who will stop her if everyone keeps looking away? You've come this far for a reason. Keep going. Some stories are only heard when someone refuses to stop listening. Sometimes, the truth walks in, only when no one's expecting it. Tristan had boarded the jet that morning, briefcase in hand and calls lined up for the day. But by noon, the deal fell through. A client backed out. Urgent family matter, they'd said. By 1 p.m., he was back in the car, silent, brooding. His assistant offered to call ahead. He shook his head. No need, he muttered. Let's see how the house runs when no one's watching. Unannounced, unplanned, unfiltered. Back at the estate, the sky was unusually still. The air, too quiet, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Kayla sat in the living room with the twins, folding their tiny socks into pairs. Eliza sat at her feet, clutching a book. Noelle leaned against her arm, thumb tucked in her mouth. Both girls were still. Too still. Not the usual fidgeting or whispered questions. Not even a giggle. They were quiet but not peaceful. Their silence buzzed like tension in a wire, ready to snap. Are you girls okay? Kayla asked gently, brushing a curl from Noelle's cheek. They didn't answer, just stared toward the hallway, waiting, dreading. Kayla turned, instinct prickling down her spine. Footsteps padded overhead, then paused. She tried to listen, but the house was back to holding secrets, until the sound came. A laugh. Not the girls. Meredith's. It floated down the stairs. Bright and melodic, but wrong. Too loud. Too deliberate. Like a mask worn by someone who forgot they were being watched. Kayla stood, heart ticking faster. Something was off. The laughter echoed again, followed by a muffled sound sharp. A yelp or a cry. She moved toward the staircase, careful not to startle the girls. But Eliza reached for her hand, eyes wide, fingers cold. She said not to tell. Eliza whispered. Kayla froze. Tell what, baby? But Eliza only shook her head, burying her face in Kayla's apron. And then, more laughter, but this time, it was layered. Laughter and crying, intertwined. One forced, one real. Kayla's blood ran cold. She crept to the base of the stairs, footsteps silent against the hardwood floor. Upstairs, Meredith's voice rang out like music in a horror film. Isn't this fun? So fun. Then a whimper. A thud. Kayla gripped the banister. What was she doing? She turned to check on the twins, both now huddled together, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if they could see through it. Then, the front door opened. Kayla spun around. Tristan stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, brow furrowed. He hadn't called ahead. He wasn't supposed to be home. His eyes scanned the room, landing on Kayla, then the girls. "What's going on?" he asked. Kayla opened her mouth, but upstairs, Meredith laughed again, and someone cried. Some of you are already trembling because you know what it's like to hear laughter that doesn't belong, to feel joy used as a mask while someone else is hurting behind closed doors. This isn't just a story, it's a reality for too many. And the ones who see it, they're often told to stay quiet. But Kayla wasn't quiet now. She looked up the stairs, then back to Tristan. She wasn't sure what she'd say next, but she knew one thing for certain. The house was no longer safe in silence. What is Meredith doing to make the twins cry and laugh at the same time, and will Tristan finally see the truth with his own eyes? You're watching because something in you refuses to look away. Hold on. The moment that changes everything is close. It only took a second to destroy the illusion. The house had fallen into an eerie rhythm of sound, muffled crying, forced laughter, the shuffle of hesitant footsteps. But nothing prepared Kayla for what she saw when she reached the living room. Eliza and Noelle were upside down, held by their ankles, dangling, their little bodies twisted in distress, dresses sliding down, bare legs flailing. Meredith gripped both girls, one in each hand, her mouth stretched in a theatrical laugh, head tilted back like this was all just a performance. "They love this," she sang, as if that made it true. But they weren't laughing. They were sobbing. High-pitched cries echoed off the cold walls, breathless and panicked. One of the girls choked out Kayla's name between gasps. The other dropped her favorite teddy bear plop onto the couch below. Forgotten. Kayla froze mid-step, hands instinctively raised in alarm. "Meredith," she screamed. "Stop. You're hurting them." The words cracked like thunder, but Meredith only grinned, eyes wild with something far too bright. "Oh, please. They beg for this game. They love it." The twins didn't love it. They clawed at the air, trying to reach for something. Anything. Their arms didn't stretch toward the woman holding them. They reached for Kayla. The front door creaked, opened, and time snapped in half. Tristan stepped inside, briefcase in hand, still shrugging off his coat. He stopped cold. The moment he looked up, his face drained of color. There, in the center of the room, Meredith laughing, the twins dangling like dolls, screaming in terror, the teddy bear on the couch. Kayla, hands raised in protest, panic stretched across her face. It all hit him at once. The reality he'd refused to see was standing in his living room, unapologetic and undeniable. For a beat, the house held its breath. Then Meredith noticed him. Her smile faltered, just slightly. Her grip on the girls tightened for a second before she eased them down, trying to turn the scene into something it wasn't. "Tristan," she breathed, voice sugar-sweet. "We were just—" He dropped the briefcase. "What the hell is going on?" His voice was hoarse, distant, like it had traveled through disbelief and landed in rage. "They love this game, ask them," Meredith said, but even her tone cracked now. "It's harmless fun." The girls scrambled toward Kayla, throwing themselves into her arms, burying their faces against her chest like they were finally safe. Not once did they look at him, not even a glance. That was what broke him. He took a step back, as if the truth itself had struck him in the chest. Kayla clutched the twins tighter, shielding them. And in that moment, the mask fell. The perfect fiancée wasn't just flawed, she was exposed. There are moments when truth kicks down the door, and no matter how carefully lies have been layered, they collapse in a single breath. Some of you watching know what it's like to be disbelieved until the moment it's undeniable. If your story was ever ignored until it became a scene too loud to erase, you are not alone. The room was silent now. Only the twins' soft sobs remained, muffled in Kayla's apron. Tristan looked at Meredith, at the girls, at Kayla. Then, the floor beneath his world finally cracked. Now that Tristan has seen the truth, what will he do with it? Will justice come swiftly, or will reputation still try to speak louder than reality? You've waited for this moment. Don't stop now. The fallout is where truth finally demands consequences. The house was quiet now, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when the wreckage is still being realized. Tristan sat on the edge of the armchair, hands buried in his hair, elbows on his knees. Kayla stood across from him, the twins tucked safely upstairs. Her voice shook, not from fear anymore, but from the release of carrying too much for too long. She doesn't hurt them where anyone can see it, Kayla said. It's always under the smile, behind closed doors. The things she says, the way she grips them when no one's around. Tristan didn't interrupt. He didn't blink. She called their fear manipulation, said they were acting out, but they weren't. They were begging. He inhaled shakily. His hands trembled, and Kayla continued. She told me to keep quiet, threatened my job. And when I tried to tell you, I didn't listen, Tristan whispered. No, sir, Kayla said. You didn't? He stood slowly, like gravity had increased in the room. Walked toward the fireplace where Lydia's portrait used to hang, now an empty wall. As he stared, fragments of memory began to piece themselves back together. He saw Lydia's face, the day she stood in this very room, her voice cracking as she warned him. You think she only wants you? You think this is about love? She hadn't just been heartbroken. She had been scared. She said it, didn't she? Tristan murmured. She said Meredith was dangerous. Kayla said nothing. She didn't have to. Tristan turned to his desk, flinging open drawers with the urgency of a man trying to rewind time. Papers flew, files landed in a heap. Then there, a beige folder with a tab labeled in fading ink. Custody considerations. Lydia Whitmore. He hadn't read it in full back then. His legal team had handled it. He opened it now. Inside, stapled reports from court-appointed evaluators. Handwritten notes. A summary from a supervised visit. One page read, Mother expressed concerns about Miss Meredith's disciplinary methods. Father dismissed concerns as emotional instability. Recommend further observation. He felt like he couldn't breathe. He'd had it all in front of him, and he chose silence. He chose ease. He chose reputation. He pressed the folder shut, clutching it like it was a confession. I thought she was unraveling, he said softly. But she wasn't. She was protecting them. Yes, sir, Kayla whispered. She was. He turned to her, eyes glassy, haunted. I let them take her voice away. And I let the wrong one raise my children. The truth didn't roar. It didn't scream. It just settled. Heavy. Final. Tristan sat down again. But he wasn't the same man who'd walked through the door earlier that day. The walls around him were cracked, and inside those cracks, regret bloomed like rot. Upstairs, the girls slept, closer together now, clinging to something they couldn't name but could finally feel. Safety. Some men don't realize the cost of their silence until the damage has already settled in the bones of their children. And some women are branded unstable just for telling the truth too soon. If you're watching this and it hurts, it's because you know that justice delayed is still justice demanded. Tristan looked up, and for the first time, he didn't ask what to do next. He already knew. The reckoning has come. But how do you fix a home built on denial, and what happens when the woman you erased becomes the only one who can save your children? This story isn't over. It's just begun. It didn't end in headlines. There was no scandal, no sirens, no whispers reaching the press. One quiet morning, before the twins woke up, Meredith was gone. Tristan handled it privately, surgically. Legal documents were signed, a private agreement sealed. Her name was removed from school forms, staff records, security access. Just like she had once erased Lydia, Meredith was now edited out. No confrontation, no farewell, just absence. Tristan never spoke of her again. He didn't need to. The girls didn't ask either. Children sense when something dangerous is gone, even if they don't yet understand why they feel safe again. The change was slow, but it was there. Noelle began sleeping through the night again. Eliza started humming to herself during breakfast. They held hands without clinging now. They laughed, but for real this time. Not the forced giggles of fear, but the soft, uncertain laughter of children learning joy again. One afternoon, Tristan stood by the window, phone in hand, staring into the garden where the girls played. Kayla walked in quietly. As always. "She knows?" she asked. He nodded. "I called. Told her it was safe now." Kayla waited. "And?" "She said she's glad. But she's not ready to come back." Kayla only nodded. Sometimes, the return isn't as simple as an open door. Some wounds need more than an apology to close. And some women learn to live with survival like a second skin. The girls didn't know their mother had been told. They just kept playing this time with their shoes off in the grass. Skin warmed by sunlight instead of shadows. A week later, Kayla folded her final basket of laundry. Her resignation note sat on Tristan's desk. Short, kind, firm. He tried to argue. "You're the reason they're okay," he said. Kayla shook her head gently. "No, I was just the one who stayed long enough to see what others ignored." She didn't need thanks. She needed to leave before her purpose was repackaged as permanence, before she was asked to do more than she already had. That evening, the twins hugged her tight, Noelle, whispering, "Don't go," and Eliza slipping a drawing into her bag. A picture of 3 stick figures holding hands. One had curly hair. Apron. Kayla kissed their foreheads. "Be brave," she whispered. "Be loud." Some endings are not celebrations, they are reckonings. And staying for stories like this is how we remember who paid the real price. The mothers dismissed, the children silenced, the helpers who dared to speak. If it hurt to watch, it's because justice, when it finally comes, is never without cost. The house felt different now, quieter, but lighter. A portrait of Lydia had been rehung above the fireplace. Not because everything was forgiven, but because forgetting was no longer an option. Kayla walked down the driveway one last time. She didn't look back. She didn't need to, because in that house behind her, the truth had finally come home. Not every betrayal is forgiven, but the truth always comes home.